Order.
The Draft Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, addition of relevant enactments, regulations 2024.
I call the Minister to move the motion. Minister Tulip Siddiq.
I beg to move that this committee considers the Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, addition of relevant enactments, regulation 2024. It's a pleasure to serve under you, Ms. Biles. The regulations being introduced today will add 4 pieces of legislation to the list set out in Section 17 of the Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, which I will refer to as FUSMA 2023, so that legislation can be temporarily modified as part of the financial market infrastructure sandboxes. The Treasury was granted the power to make provision for FMI sandboxes by Section 13 of FUSMA 2023, as the House will know, and the list of legislation that the Treasury can temporarily modify in an FMI sandbox is set out in Section 17. A financial market infrastructure sandbox, which I will refer to as FMI sandbox, is designed to provide a controlled regulatory environment in which existing legislation and regulation is temporarily removed or modified. FMI sandbox participants can test new and developing technologies and practices that would otherwise be inhibited by existing legislation outside of the sandbox. If activity in an FMI sandbox is successful, and only after laying a report before Parliament, the Treasury can make permanent changes to legislation by laying a further affirmative SI. The testing of new technologies and practices is inherently uncertain and will evolve over time, as the House knows, meaning it is likely that the list of legislation in scope would likely need to be added to. For this reason, the Treasury also has the power to add further legislation to the list at Section 17 of FUSMA, as set out in Section 17 of FUSMA 2023. Through the testing of new technologies and practices in an FMI sandbox, we are likely to identify additional legislative modifications. The ability to add further legislation to the list is a way of ensuring that the FMI sandbox regime can be kept up to date. This statutory instrument exercises the power set out in Section 17 of the FUSMA 2023 so that the 4 items of legislation can be added to support 2 FMI sandboxes, namely the existing Digital Security Sandbox, which I will refer to as DSS, and the Private Intermittent Securities and Capital Exchange System Sandbox, also known as the Pisces Sandbox, because in the Treasury we love acronyms. The DSS will enable firms to test new and innovative technology across financial market infrastructure activities, and the Pisces Sandbox will allow private companies to have their shares traded on an intermittent basis on a new type of stock market. This statutory instrument will bring the following legislation into scope of the power to make temporary modifications in FMI sandboxes: the stock transfer, gilt-edged securities, CGO Service Regulations 1985, which I will refer to as STRS, the Government Stock Regulations 2004, which I will refer to as GSRS, the Money Laundering, Terrorist Financing and Transfer of Funds Information on the Pair Regulation 2017, which I will refer to as MLRS, and Regulation EU 2017 of the European Parliament and of the Council, also known as the Prospectus Regulation, which we inherited from the EU. Temporarily modifying the STRS and GSRs will enable us to support the issuance of a digital gilt instrument through the DSS. I and the Financial Secretary to the Treasury set out further details of this pilot in a written ministerial statement to both houses on the 18th of November, which you may have seen. The MLRs will be modified to facilitate an exemption from the crypto asset regime in the MLRs in the DSS participants. This is on the basis that activity in the DSS will involve regulated securities such as bonds and equities are already regulated, so conventional anti-money laundering legislation will be applied in the normal way. The prospectus regulation will be modified as part of the Pisces Sandbox so that prospectus requirements can be disapplied in favour of bespoke disclosure requirements in the Pisces Sandbox. I should note at this point that this statutory instrument does not make any temporary changes to the 4 specific items of legislation under the procedure stipulated by FSMA 2023. This will be done as part of a further negative SIs to be laid before Parliament, which will provide all the relevant explanatory information for the changes being made to each enactment. The Government has also published a draft of instrument that will set up the Pisces sandbox in November for public comment ahead of it being laid in May. Similarly, the DSS has already been established by a statutory instrument laid last December, although changes to the MLRS will require a further statutory instrument, and this is to be laid before Parliament in January. I do recognise this has been very technical, but in closing, the statutory instrument will make changes consistent with the powers established by FSMA 2023, which was led by the party opposite, which we supported in opposition, and support the continued development of the DSS and the future FMI sandboxes, such as the Pisces sandbox. We do believe from the Government that this will help to support innovation through each of these FMI sandboxes, and I hope the committee will feel able to support these regulations and these objectives, and I commend them to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the committee has considered the draft Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, edition of relevant enactments, regulations 2024. Shadow Minister Mark Garnier.
Well, thank you very much, Mrs. Vaz. Well, I think this is our fourth or fifth meeting across this room. And yet again, I don't think we're going to have any problems with this at all. Can I just actually say on reference to these meetings, the last time I asked her a number of questions, and I'm incredibly grateful to her and her office for getting back so quickly, and I think it illustrates a very good working relationship we have between the opposition and the government on this. That we're absolutely delighted with all of these. I was struggling actually to work out some complicated questions for you in order to make you work for your office, but actually the only one I can come up with is you've made some the Minister has made some references to some further statutory instruments coming in, but it would be very helpful for the House if we had an idea of the timeline of when this will be completed and when all of this will be in place and would have got through the process. But aside from that, we're very happy to support this, and thank you very much for all those acronyms. I'm learning more and more of them each time we meet. Thank you very much.
Minister. Thank you very much, Ms. Vaz. The Treasurer, first of all, to say thank you to the Shadow Minister for the constructive relationship. There will be many fights in this room, I'm sure, but they're not happening yet. And he'll be delighted to know we're back here at 6 o'clock again today with a similarly simple statutory instrument, I have to say. We intend to lay the statutory instrument before Parliament by May next year, and that will provide the legal framework for the Pisces sandbox. And the testing of new technology and practices is uncertain, as you will probably know, meaning that there may be future FMI sandboxes that may have a different focus, but requiring changes to legislation that haven't been previously considered. So it's not really possible to put a timeline on it, but the statutory instrument for Pisces will be laid by May 2025. The statutory instrument, as I'm sure the Shadow Minister will recognise, is an important step forward for us in the development of the digital security sandbox and the future financial market infrastructure sandbox, such as Pisces, which is world-leading and very impressive for our government. It will be a good thing for the financial services sector. It will ensure that these financial market infrastructure sandboxes are able to facilitate innovation while ensuring that all the risks are proportionately managed, as well as ensuring that firms are actually incentivised to participate. So, thank you all very much for participating in this debate. I hope you found it informative. I hope you learn all the acronyms like I have. And I will say something else, which is that the changes that are going to be laid out in detail in a negative statutory instrument that we intend to lay before Parliament, we will be modifying the money laundering regulations to ensure that activity in the digital security sandbox is not caught under the definition of crypto assets in the MLRs. So we will also provide him for a timeline on that, if that makes sense, the Shadow Minister. So I hope you'll all join me in supporting these regulations. Thank you.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Financial Services and Markets Act 2023, edition of relevant enactments, regulations 2024. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.